Well, hello and welcome to another Faith, Philosophy and Life with me, Mr. Shelton. I do hope that you are doing well. Behind me is a picture. I can't remember where I got this picture from, but I do like the look of it. What's going on in it? See if you can work it out. Okay, so you've got the idea of people going up to heaven, the heavenly city, people going down to the fiery hell, and then people wibbling around in the middle. But please note how people get to heaven according to this picture. They have to walk underneath the cross of Jesus. That's symbolic of belief in Jesus and salvation and atonement that we talked about last time. If you don't know what salvation and atonement means, maybe have a think about that while our cheesy intro sequence is on, and maybe do a quick Google. So, our title today is What Do Christians Believe About Life After Death? What do Christians believe about life after death? Do get that written down. Do pause me as we go as normal. So today we're going to explore Christian beliefs about life after death. It's going to be a good outcome if you can retell the three key beliefs that Christians believe. It's going to be great if you can give two pieces of information about each of these three beliefs. And even better if you can tie that information into a dreaded exam question. But don't panic, it's not a complicated one. So let's look at what we're doing during today's session. So we're going to look at 5 things. We are got a media clip, we're going to do some bite-sized work and some exam questions as well. So to start off with the 5 things then, 5 reasons for the afterlife. In the description below you will find an information sheet which has got lots of beliefs for the afterlife, and I'd like you to read through them, and I'd like you to choose 5 that you think they're decent arguments, or I actually really don't agree with those. I don't mind which way you go. And what I'd like you to do is to explain those 5. So what's your opinion about those 5, and why do you hold that opinion? So one of them might be, for example, that people claim to have come back to life after they had died and they had something called a near-death experience. Well, what do you think about that? Do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that, and why? So you choose the 5 that you want, and then you write those down and explain in your own words why you think what you do. So pause me now while you do that. You'll find it all in the description below, and come back to me when you're done. Okay, so hopefully as well in the description below you'll have seen a worksheet. It's called Worksheet, really not that complicated, and I'd like you to access that. Looks like this. What we're going to do is I'm going to play to you a clip which I'd like you to watch, and I would like you to complete that grid as we go through it. It's as simple as that, people. So let's watch this now. And let's get on with that. Come back to me when you've finished it. So you obviously need to get the worksheet. And if you don't have access to a printer, you can just draw it out anyway. Here's the clip.
This revision video is looking at Christian beliefs about heaven, hell and purgatory. Now let's start with looking at the ideas of hell from a Christian point of view. In the past, they concentrate on hell literally being a real place. So a place of eternal and indescribable torture for non-believers and people that have turned away from the church, from the religion. In the medieval times, it was the church that actually kind of used hell as a way to scare and keep people in fear and almost control people to keep them belonging to the religion and obviously supporting the religion. Today, some Christians do believe that hell is a physical place, because in the Bible there are some evidence to say actually it's there, it's real. You know, it's a place that you will spend eternity being tortured. Matthew's Gospel is a good example here. God said to those on his left, the goats, this is taken from the parable of the sheep and the goats, "Depart from me, for you are cursed into the eternal fire, prepare for the devil and his angels." So making it sound like a very real place. A lot of the Christian art came showing these terrible, torturous places. I mean, look at the photo here. Various different methods of torture shown. However, some Christians look at hell as not being a real place, so more of a symbolic idea, a way to kind of sum up being without God, so just nothingness. And obviously being without God is the worst thing imaginable, and I suppose that's where some of the ideas of hell come from, because when you try and think of the worst thing imaginable, what comes to mind? But basically it is being without God, so not real, just nothing. Let's look at the Christian ideas of heaven, and of course heaven would be the opposite to hell, and therefore that is eternal presence with God, so you're in God's presence. Now again, let's go to the Holy Bible and let's have a look at where these ideas come from. Well, there's quite a few references to heaven in the Bible, and Revelations gives a lot of descriptions of what heaven is like. One of them here from 21:4 says there will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain. Well, that sounds like a lovely place, doesn't it? Revelations again, 21:18, talks about the actual descriptions. It says the walls, the foundations, and the walls are made of jasper, and the city of pure gold, that's pure as glass, so quite a spectacular place. Foundations decorated with every kind of precious stone, so a place of wonder. Obviously one of the key things here is Christians believe that life after death is eternity, because obviously your soul is eternal, that hopefully goes back to God in heaven, and it is eternity you spend with God. So look at it from that point of view. Now Christians also have an idea of purgatory, but let me just stress that this is purely a Roman Catholic belief. So when you talk about purgatory, you've got to say Catholic belief, because obviously they're the only denomination in Christianity who have this idea. Purgatory, Catholic Christians believe that when you die in a spiritual state and you're in a friendship with God, so you've been good, you'll go to heaven. However, a lot of people, when they die, are not quite ready to be in God's presence, so they're not quite pure enough yet, and therefore they have to go through what they call final purification, or where they go to purgatory, so that they can be purified. Now think of it like this. Obviously purgatory, it is kind of the state of being suspended in the middle. You're kind of waiting. People often refer to it as God's waiting room. So they're not obviously bad enough to go to hell, they're not good enough yet to go to heaven, but eventually they will be purified and they will go to heaven. This belief in purgatory also explains why Catholics pray for the dead. So they basically believe that they're not beyond help. They believe prayers could help those people in purgatory to hopefully be released and join God in heaven, which is why Roman Catholics believe in saying prayers for the dead.
Okay, so part of all this is to do with the word judgment. How you people choose, or how people are chosen, should I say, if they go to heaven or hell. Now, it's an interesting one, this one, because according to the church, and that I mean the Catholic Church, it's a very different idea. Now remember, the Catholic Church has this idea of purgatory, which isn't a Church of England perspective, or any other tradition within Christianity as well. So the two questions I'd like you to answer using this information behind me, which is, what does judgment look like to the church, as in the Catholic Church, and how are people judged? Now, here's some ideas for you. So hell is a place of punishment for those who reject God through their own free will. The person in the parables, which we've talked about or thought about, the parables, for example, like Lazarus, where there's somebody who is in heaven as a poor person lives in heaven. Someone who's rich goes to hell. The person who is rich begs that Lazarus, this poor person in heaven, comes to rescue him, and he says no. God says no, that is not going to happen. When you in that divide has occurred. Well, that kind of gets rid of the idea of compassion and love and mercy, because God said no. Once you're in hell, then you get stuck in hell. And the Bible, or should I say, the church quite often uses imagery of fire and punishments to describe this place that we actually can't understand. The Bible does talk about it being a fiery pit as well. See, Catholics believe in both general judgment, which is shown in the sheep and the goats, which is this idea that you're judged through your action, salvation through works, and particular judgment, which is where your soul is judged for the actions of its body. I wouldn't really get too hung up about that, to be perfectly honest with you, but do focus on the idea of general judgment and the sheep and the goats. If you don't know what that parable is, it's where Jesus talks about the Son of Man dividing people into two groups, one being sheep, one being goats, and the sheep are rewarded with a place in heaven, the goats aren't, based on their actions. Now, there's also something called purgatory, which is what we have briefly been alluding to in the clip you've just seen. Purgatory means to purge our sins before we enter heaven. It's kind of a state of hope rather than a place. And on All Souls Day or All Saints Day, which is the day after Halloween, Catholics will pray for the people who have died. And the idea is that if their souls are in purgatory, then it might reduce the amount of time they're in purgatory. St. Paul says this. Now, arguably, is it what the Bible teaches? Is it what St. Paul teaches? But this is the Catholic interpretation of it. It will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. So there's that idea there, and that's where the Catholic Church gets the idea of purgatory from, that the Bible does talk about this idea that you'll be tested, and if you are pure, then you'll go to heaven. And that's why Catholics might pray for the departed on All Souls Day and other times as well. So what does judgment look like? Well, I'll just talk about general judgment, get something written down about that now, and how are people judged, and it's this idea of purgatory. Okay, so the next task then that I'm going to give you is to look at the BBC Bite-sized stuff that I've put in the link below. There are two sheets there deliberately so you can put them next to each other to help. Now, if you don't have access to a printer, then just do what you can. Don't bother writing out the full grid, but just do what you can with that. If you do have access to a printer, then probably best to print that off or annotate it on the screen. It's fairly self-explanatory. So you need to read the information in order to answer the questions. I've got one more thing to go after this, so do pause me and come back to me. Leave yourself sort of 7 or 8 more minutes of your work time so we can get the last bit done. So we said a good outcome would be to retell 3 key beliefs about what Christians believe. And if you can talk about heaven, hell and purgatory, you're in the right place. A great outcome if you can give 2 pieces of information about each of these 3 beliefs. So if you can say what heaven is or who lives there, what hell is and how people get there, and what purgatory is, then that's exactly what you need. And an even better outcome, you can tie it into an exam question, and that's where we're up to. So this is a 5 marker. This is really straightforward. Explain 2 Christians' belief about life after death. You should refer to specific religious teachings or sacred text. Now, these are my God jitters. You don't have to use these. These are obviously good ones to use, but obviously you've got other things that we've talked about that you can use as well. So you're going to do 2 paragraphs, or should I say 2 bits that are expanded, that talk about some Christians believe this about life after death, some Christians believe this about life after death, and if you can, a Bible quote to go with at least one of those, if not both of them. So think back to salvation and atonement. Think back to what heaven is described like in the work that you've done. Think back to what purgatory is described like in what we've just read from St. Paul. So give that a go, and we'll go over how to mark that at the end. Okay, so if it's a simple explanation, it's worth 1 mark. If it's an expanded explanation, it's worth 2 marks. And if you've got a quote in there, that would be your additional goal. So give yourself a grade now out of 5 and set yourself a target to see what you could do in the future differently. If you've got time, depending on how long you've got left of this lesson, you can create a little guide to the afterlife, which you could be talking about arguments with regards to what heaven will be like and what hell will be like and what purgatory would be like. But if you haven't got time, don't worry about that, because I didn't ask you to leave a huge amount of time left and I don't know where you're up to with your lesson. What I can tell you though is that you've met your objectives, and our final task is to write down 3 questions with answers that you could ask somebody else in your class about today's work. Obviously the more challenging you can. So it might be, for example, who do you think lives in heaven? That's a bit of an easy one, but I'm sure you could talk about sapphire and stuff like that, really hem that up, make that difficult. So I'm going to leave that there. So thanks for your time. Take care of yourself, stay safe, wash hands, God bless you, and I'll be seeing you soon for our next lesson.